A babysitting job. Seems so normal, right? A trusted arrangement between neighbors. This was in North Ogden, Utah. And just a simple act of trust, really. That's where this horrifying story of 16-year-old Alexis Rasmussen began, September 10, 2011. But it ended in this absolute tragedy, rooted in what the prosecution later called just a catastrophically misplaced decision by her mother.
Yeah, we've taken a really deep dive into the source material on this one. It's devastating. We're focusing on the chronology, the betrayal, the calculated lives that followed, and also the pretty brilliant legal strategy they needed to actually prosecute the two adults responsible, Eric and Dia Millerberg.
So Alexis Rasmussen, she was a Weber High student, goes over to the Millerberg house, supposed to be just a routine night. Her mom, Dawn Mieres, she was even texting her late, gave her permission to stay over. But what actually happened? Well, the prosecution put it bluntly. No babysitting going on here at all.
The Millerberg house, it was operating under this dangerous intentional facade. That night Lexi was there, it was actually, like you said, drug-fueled indulgence and sexual exploitation. That trust from Lexi's mom. It was just immediately and profoundly betrayed.
And that betrayal, it just snowballed instantly. Turned into this 38-day campaign of, well, sustained cruelty against Lexi's family.
Yeah.
Let's start there. The deception. Right from the moment she didn't come home, September 11th.
Right. The Millerbergs, they immediately launched this calculated deception. When the police and Lexi's mom started looking, Eric and Dia told them, oh, Lexi just left before midnight, went to meet a friend. They tried to make it sound plausible. Maybe she ran off, skipped out for the night, something like that.
But the investigators, they were sharp, moved fast.
Huh.
They actually talked to the friend Lexi was supposedly going to meet. And that boy confirmed. Nope, they had only texted. So the Millerberg story, it just completely fell apart right away, put them right in the center of her disappearance.
Yeah, and what's so striking about this period is just the sheer audacity of it all. For 38 agonizing days, Lexi's family, the community, they're leading this desperate, frantic search. They set up a Bring Alexis Home Facebook page coordinating everything. Meanwhile, the Millerbergs, knowing she was dead the whole time, they kept up this facade, pretending they knew nothing, looking the mother in the eye, actively obstructing the police.
Yeah.
It's just chilling.
And the reason for all this cruelty, it wasn't about saving the child, obviously. It was about Eric Millerberg saving himself. He was already on probation. Apparently told a friend he was not going back to prison for that girl. His own skin completely trumped any shred of decency.
That's absolutely critical to understanding their mindset, yeah. Their own legal status mattered more than a child's life, more than ending the family's torment. And there's this huge irony here, too. While they're busy lying and obstructing the search, they're actually getting into other trouble. Both Eric and Dia got arrested on totally unrelated charges. Eric for a heroin parole violation, Dia for prescription drug fraud. So suddenly they're in custody anyway, and boom, they become the absolute prime persons of interest in Lexi's disappearance.
That fear of prison, it really drives us right into the crime itself, doesn't it? Let's look at these two adults, because the sources make it clear this wasn't just a one-off bad decision. This was like systematic exploitation. Eric Millerberg, 36 at the time, the architect of ruin, as some sources called him.
Yeah, Eric had this really extensive criminal history. But more than that, he'd cultivated this predatory environment. The Millerberg home was known as a crash pad, basically. Teenagers could go there, get drugs. He openly bragged, apparently, about partying with teenage girls, supplying them with drugs, often in exchange for sex.
And the evidence of this grooming, it's just chillingly specific. There's mention of Eric talking about another 16-year-old girl who wanted to be shot with narcotics. He apparently said he eventually did that for her. I mean, it establishes this clear, depraved pattern towards vulnerable kids.
Exactly. And then you have Dia Millerberg. She was 40, a former nurse. That makes her complicity even more, I don't know, stark. Okay, she had her own struggles with addiction. The sources mention that. But her critical role here is she had medical knowledge. She knew what an overdose looked like. She probably knew how to potentially save Lexi.
Yet she chose the cover-up instead. If we piece together that fatal night, mostly from Dia's own later testimony, the sequence is just horrifying.
It was a rapid descent. Dia testified Eric prepared 3 syringes of heroin, one for him, one for her, and one for Lexi. After that initial dose, the testimony indicates multiple methamphetamine injections followed. And Eric, she said, prepared and personally injected Lexi each time, including 1 syringe directly into her neck.
Wow. That toxic mix, it hit Lexi hard and fast. She reportedly said she was as high as she has ever been, complained about being intensely cold, tried taking a bath to warm up, and then she was found unresponsive on the bed.
And Dea, the former nurse, described seeing mucousy stuff coming out of the right side of her mouth. She apparently tried CPR, but they quickly realized it was fatal. And this, right here, this is the huge moral turning point. You've got a medical emergency, a dying child. But instead of calling 911, they made a conscious, calculated decision, driven entirely by self-preservation, specifically Eric's probation. Dea testified really plainly later, "We decided police were not going to be called."
That decision just dictates everything that followed,
Yeah.
the terrifying steps they took next. How did they dispose of her body?
It was just cold, systematic. They dressed her body, wrapped it tightly in a blanket, placed it inside a large, Foot Locker-style box. Then they loaded that box into the trunk of their car.
And this next detail, it just shows the complete moral vacuum they were in. It's almost unbelievable. They took their infant daughter with them when they drove out to dump Lexi's body in this remote, wooded area. But they left their 6-year-old child home alone while they did it.
Yeah, it speaks volumes, doesn't it, about how addiction and self-interest had just completely warped their judgment, prioritizing getting rid of evidence over the safety of their own kids. Yeah.
So after 38 agonizing days, thankfully, this cover-up finally cracked.
Yes. The breakthrough came from a confidential informant, a man who, it turns out, had actually helped Eric move the body initially. Based on that crucial tip, police finally located Lexi's remains, October 18th, 2011. In a remote spot near I-84 in Morgan County.
Finding her was huge, obviously. But because her body had been out there for over a month, the forensic challenges were massive. And this created the biggest legal hurdle for the prosecution, right?
Absolutely. The body was described as badly decomposed. That complicated the autopsy significantly. They could identify her through dental records, sure. But the medical examiner, Dr. Joseph White, faced real limitations. Now, the toxicology report was damning. Lexi had, get this, 7 times the lethal amount of methamphetamine plus high levels of morphine. Dr. White confirmed that was certainly enough to explain the death.
But he couldn't definitively rule out other causes because of the decomposition, so the official cause and manner of death listed as undetermined. The source material notes this was really the most intellectually honest conclusion he could reach given the state of the remains.
Exactly. Intellectually honest, but it handed the defense this incredibly powerful tool. They could argue reasonable doubt all day long. Ask the jury, how do you know she didn't die from something else? The experts couldn't even say for sure.
Okay, so this is where the legal strategy from the prosecutors, D. Smith and Christopher Shaw, gets really fascinating. And, frankly, pivotal. They knew trying for traditional murder or manslaughter, which rely on proving a clear cause of death, was probably a losing battle. So they strategically charged Eric with child abuse homicide.
This was brilliant. Just brilliant. It completely reframed the whole case narrative. They shifted the focus away from the medical question, what exactly killed her, to the moral and behavioral question, which was, did Eric Millerberg recklessly exploit and abuse this minor child?
Can you break that down a bit more? What did child abuse homicide actually require them to prove? How is it different from, say, reckless manslaughter?
Okay, so with traditional reckless manslaughter, you usually focus on proving the specific lethal act was reckless. The child abuse homicide statute, though, it allowed them to basically sidestep that undetermined ruling. They only needed to prove 2 main things. First, that Eric was committing child abuse, giving her lethal drugs, the unlawful sexual contact, and second, that her death resulted from his reckless actions while committing that abuse.
Ah, okay. So they didn't need to prove he intended to kill her, or even that the final injection was the sole definitive cause, just that his ongoing reckless abuse of a minor led directly to her death. That strategic charge basically set the whole stage for the trial in February 2014.
It really did. And the entire prosecution case then hinged on one person, one incredibly compromised figure, Dea Millerberg.
Right, she's the only one who could describe exactly what happened that night, the injections, everything. So to get her to cooperate, the prosecutors had to give her something called use immunity. Hold on, for listeners maybe not familiar with legal stuff, what does use immunity actually mean here? Was she just totally off the hook?
No, not at all. It was very targeted protection. Use immunity meant that the specific testimony she gave about the events leading to the death, the injections, the drug use, watching Lexi die, couldn't be used directly against her if they decided to prosecute her for homicide later. It basically shielded her from the most serious charge, the homicide itself. But she was still absolutely on the hook for everything else, the obstruction, desecrating the body, all that.
Okay, got it. So she becomes the state's key witness, the linchpin, detailing that horrific night. Meanwhile, the defense, led by Randall Marshall, their strategy was laser-focused. attack Dea's credibility, hammer it.
Oh, yeah. Marshall called her a manipulative liar, argued she was deeply involved, totally complicit, and only testifying to save her own skin. The defense also kept bringing up the medical examiner's undetermined ruling over and over, trying to plant doubt, asking the jury, how do we really know Dea didn't shoot her up?
Okay, so the defense had a pretty strong legal argument, right, based on the forensics, and they had this star witness who was, let's face it, highly questionable. How did the prosecution actually manage to convince the jury to trust Dea's testimony enough to convict Eric?
Well, the prosecution didn't just rely on Dea in isolation. They built this narrative, this picture of the reckless environment Eric himself had created. Dea's testimony, even if parts were self-serving, was corroborated by other evidence. Physical evidence found, Eric's own bragging to others about supplying drugs to teens. So even if the jury thought Dea was frankly a terrible person trying to save herself, the prosecution still managed to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that Eric, through his systematic, ongoing, reckless abuse, was the one who ultimately caused Lexi's death.
And that narrative, it clearly worked. It resonated. After just a 3-day trial, the jury took only 2 hours to find Eric Millerberg guilty. All 4 counts, including the big one, child abuse homicide.
Yeah, and at sentencing, Judge Scott M. Hadley didn't mince words. He firmly rejected any idea this was just some tragic accident. He called the homicide especially egregious. He said, quote, intentionally injecting a young lady with dangerous drugs multiple times is just beyond reckless. Eric Millerberg was sentenced to 6 years to life in prison.
Which brings us back to Dea Millerberg and this complex, kind of uneasy resolution. Her testimony was absolutely the key. The linchpin needed to convict Eric, the main aggressor here. It's what some might call justice by necessity.
Exactly. The system had to make a really painful compromise. In exchange for that crucial testimony, prosecutors agreed not to hit her with the most serious charges, the homicide or sexual conduct. She ended up pleading guilty to 3 third-degree felonies: desecration of a human body, obstructing justice, and that illegal prescription charge from earlier.
So while Eric got essentially life, Dea was sentenced to up to 5 years. And she actually got early parole in October 2018, served about 4 years. That's got to be a profoundly difficult outcome for the family to accept. Knowing the accomplice, the person who watched their daughter die and helped dump her body, is now free.
It really highlights a tough reality of the justice system sometimes, doesn't it? Sometimes getting the main perpetrator requires giving the accomplice leverage. The bigger legal goal here was making sure the person who orchestrated the whole predatory situation, who provided the lethal environment, Eric Millerberg, was put away for good.
In the end, the family got a verdict, yes. But justice, it doesn't fill the hole Lexi left behind. Her uncle Scott Rudd said it perfectly after the verdict. It helps with a little closure, but the fact of the matter is we still don't have Lexi.
And you just can't forget the immense guilt and sorrow from Alexis's mother, Dawn Mura. She said, as a parent, your job is to protect your children, and I failed, that quote. It just captures the catastrophic emotional toll this kind of deep, systemic betrayal takes on a family.
So when we step back and look at this whole case, the main takeaway is just chillingly simple, isn't it? Alexis Rasmussen's death wasn't some random accident. It was the predictable, tragic end result of systematic grooming and criminal exploitation by 2 adults. 2 people who, when they faced that critical choice, save a child's life or save their own freedom, they consciously chose themselves.
Yeah. This case just reveals the shocking extent that self-interest and addiction can completely gut someone's moral judgment, how it can turn a trusted, everyday neighborhood setup into something monstrous. It really underscores how vital it is to look beyond that facade of normalcy sometimes, to be aware.
And that leaves us with maybe a provocative thought to end on. Think about this. If the prosecution hadn't had that legal flexibility, if they couldn't pivot to the child abuse homicide charge, and if they'd failed to convict Eric Millerberg because of that undetermined cause of death, would the price of Dea Millerberg's immunity still been worth the risk?
It's a terrifying kind of legal gamble that, thankfully, paid off here. But it really speaks volumes about the limits of forensic science sometimes in getting justice for victims.